Hello, I'm Matt Galloway, and this is the Current Podcast. It's been a tricky couple of weeks for the Conservative Party of Canada. In the span of 48 hours, 2 MPs suddenly announced they were leaving the caucus, one crossing the floor to the Liberal Party. And that has brought into question how strong Pierre Poilievre's hold over his party actually is. Yesterday, Pierre Poilievre spoke to reporters for the first time since the 2 departures.
Does this say anything about your leadership? Have you maybe reflected on your leadership style moving forward?
No, my plan is to continue to lead and be the only leader in the country that's fighting for an affordable Canada where our people who work hard can afford a home and food. That is my agenda.
With a leadership review coming up in January, we've brought together 3 Conservative strategists to talk about the path ahead for the opposition leader. Ginny Roth served as Director of Communications on Pierre Poilievre's leadership campaign. Erika Barootes is a Conservative commentator, former Principal Secretary to the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith. And Regan Watts is a former senior aide to the late Conservative Finance Minister Jim Flaherty and founder of the advisory firm Fratton Park, Inc. Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Matt.
Good morning. Good morning.
Ginny, describe the mood of the Conservative Party of Canada this week.
Well, I guess it depends who you talk to. I think the mood is, I think it's fair to say it was down last week when Chris d'Entremont crossed the floor. Having someone leave your caucus, it's sort of, you become like this weird big family. And so having someone leave feels like that. It feels like a rupture in a group of friends or a family. But by the end of the week, I attended the speech that Poilievre gave last Friday in Toronto on the budget. And it was a packed room, incredibly upbeat. He was sort of relaxed and pretty confident and comfortable. And so I think they capped off the week last week feeling pretty good. And this week, I think they're sort of back to work. I don't know if the media is ready to cover what they want them to have cover, but I think the mood is sort of back to where it was over the past number of weeks, which was excited about drawing contrast with the Liberals and trying to present an alternative in the context of the budget.
Regan, how would you describe the mood in the party, particularly when you have, one member of caucus crossing the floor to the Liberals, the other apparently leaving to spend more time with his family?
Well, I think there's a couple of things there, and Ginny touched on some of it. I think the mood amongst party members is different than maybe the mood in Ottawa amongst the leadership and with the leader. Certainly in Ottawa, it feels chaotic. I think that's the story coming out of last week is while there was a resignation and a defection, it's the manner and the chaos in which those announcements were rolled out that for the people I speak with and in my own observations is really worrying people. It was not a good week. And I noted the leader's comments, Mr. Poilievre's comments in the lead segment into this discussion about how he wasn't going to change his leadership style. And I just, not acknowledging that last week was not a great week, I think is a miss. And I think as Conservatives, we have to see things as they are, as Margaret Thatcher used to say, not as we want them to be. And things are not great in Ottawa. Amongst the party membership, though, I mean, look, it's still a party with hundreds of thousands of members and raising millions of dollars. And so the Conservative Party as an entity is still strong, and the membership are certainly motivated. But what's happening in Ottawa has not been good.
I want to come back to Mr. Poilievre's comments in a moment. Erika, what's the perspective in Alberta? I mean, it's interesting. Matt Galloway is leaving in the spring, apparently. There were rumors that he was going to cross the floor to the Liberals. Speculation, talk that he actually met with the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, about this. And apparently that's according to Liberal sources. But now he says he's going to spend more time with his family. How's that going down in your province?
You know what? I actually think that the reception Matt Galloway got versus Chris d'Entremont is probably night and day. I think for Matt, many people, at least from my Facebook resource, thanked him for his service and then kind of moved on. It was similar to, I think, what Ginny was saying. It was kind of just sort of a Band-Aid ripped off last week in the difficulty. I think the sentiment towards Matt for possibly staying on, whether he stays as a lame duck MP or not, that he didn't cross the floor, it was very much received differently than I think Chris d'Entremont going home to his constituency last week. So again, I still think from the average person, like if I ask people in Alberta what happened last week, some might know that Matt Galloway is resigning. But to be honest, I think this is something that's very Ottawa-centric, at least from my circles.
Regan, Matt Galloway said in his statement, I want to be clear, these are his words, I want to be clear, there was no coercion in my decision to resign. Why would he say that?
I mean, I found, back to my earlier comment, Matt, I thought the communication of these two decisions from both Mr. Genereux and Mr. D'Entremont were chaotic, and it was very strange. I can't speak for Mr. Genereux and why he issued two statements, and in particular the comments that you just mentioned. What I can say, though, is nobody's come out and said that Mr. Genereux didn't meet with the Liberal Party or didn't meet with the Prime Minister or didn't meet with senior folks on the other side of the aisle. So at some point, he was talking to Liberals. That seems to be a fact. And he's decided for whatever reason, and he can speak for himself. And he's issued, as I say, those two statements, why he decided he no longer wanted to be a member of Parliament. I find the whole thing very strange, and it doesn't quite add up. It's one of those things that, blink twice just to make sure we know you're okay. In that second statement, I haven't heard a third statement or another alternative. So I think there's still going to be questions about why he resigned and why he put those words in there. But nobody has said he didn't do what he was accused of doing, which was talking to the Liberal government.
Chris D'Entremont has been speaking. He spoke with our colleague Catherine Cullen just a few days ago. And he, as we said, crossed the floor to the Liberals, described what he says is the culture of the Conservative Party. Have a listen to this.
People aren't happy with the leadership style, not just of the leader, but of the leadership team that's there. Quite honestly, a lot of times I felt it was a part of a frat house rather than a serious political party. It was about who was friends with who, what kind of fun could you have with something, how could you end up beating up on someone else, who could be the most negative, who could be the most cutting. It wasn't about opposing something. It wasn't about keeping government to account. It wasn't about trying to do the best for your constituents. It was about tearing down. And again, as a progressive conservative in Nova Scotia, a long-term progressive conservative, I'm looking at building bridges. I wasn't looking at tearing them down.
Ginny, does that sound like the Conservative Party that you're a member of?
Well, it doesn't sound like the Chris D'Entremont I heard from a few weeks ago, who was tearing down the government as a member of the opposition, as the opposition is wont to do.
But does that sound like the party? He says it's a party that is more like a frat house than a political party. The people are trying to figure out how to be more cutting, as he says.
I mean, the Conservatives I meet are more nerdy than they are frat boyish. It's a weird set of imagery for me. To me, he's describing the opposition, and an opposition that came really close to forming government and is now trying to find new contrast with the government, something that he was very much a part of doing in debates in the House of Commons and statements he made publicly about the government's agenda, which he has now joined. So I cannot see inside Chris D'Entremont's heart. I don't know why he crossed the floor. There's speculation that there are all kinds of different reasons. But the proof will be in the pudding. If there are all kinds of caucus members who are unhappy with the party, they may leave. I see no evidence that they will. And there's going to be a real test of Pierre Poilievre's leadership in a leadership review in January. I'm sure we'll get to that. And that is, the party's constitution has that embedded for a reason, that leaders, when they lose elections, need to face that reckoning. And I think that is really that the Conservative Party is set up to do that. That's the moment where members can have their say. And then ultimately voters will get a chance to have their say again if he's successful in that leadership review. And the last time voters were asked, a historic number said they thought Pierre Poilievre should be prime minister. So, for me, that weighs a lot more than one disgruntled MP in his comments.
Erika, what do you make of the frat house culture that Chris D'Entremont is describing there?
I mean, I agree with Ginny. It's not really what I equate to the conservative movement. But I take his point, meaning he thinks that it was maybe not his cup of tea. But honestly, that doesn't sound like a conservative party. Now, if you're holding the government account by lobbing grenades at the other side or trying to get the government off of their talking points, et cetera, that is the point of the opposition. So I don't know, from Chris D'Entremont, who said he was a conservative a week ago, whatever he says, I find hard to believe anyway. So I'm not going to lose much sleep on his comments about how the Conservative Party operates inside the House. And I think Ginny's right. It's we will see. I haven't heard anything of anyone else crossing. I'm sure that was a very uncomfortable caucus meeting. But if you didn't leave now, I feel like you'd lose a lot of your own political opportunity. So I think this was a very tough week for the Conservatives. Never ideal when you could actually go after a very weak budget for many things. They didn't get that opportunity. But I don't see this being drawn out longer than last week.
Regan, what do you make of this? In part because people have drawn connections, not just from what Chris d'Entremont has said, but things that Pierre Poilievre has said that created apparently some tension within the caucus. His comments about the leadership of the RCMP on a podcast, calling that leadership despicable. You had Dimitri Soudis, a former communications director for the party under Stephen Harper, saying that Pierre Poilievre, in his words, is dismantling the principled, serious, incredible Conservative party that Harper worked so hard to lead, a party of substance, maturity, and integrity. How widespread do you think Chris d'Entremont's feelings are in terms of them being held within the party?
Well, I think there's certainly discontent within the party for Mr. Poilievre and his leadership for lots of reasons. But I will say, in picking up on something Ginny said, like the members will have their say in January, and your listeners should know that. Look, I personally expect Mr. Poilievre to do just fine at the leadership review in January. Whether he remains leader or not, I think will end up being up to caucus in the end. I think stepping back though, Matt, for a second, the last election and elections provide mandates for every party in them. And, the Liberals got their mandate to govern. Sometimes I think the Liberals misinterpret their mandate. I think they have a bigger mandate than they actually received. And I do sense a little bit of smugness on the government side over the ails of the Conservative Party over the last week. But I also think, Mr. Poilievre also got a mandate from Canadians. And Ginny's right. He did win the most votes of any Conservative leader since Brian Mulroney. However, he also empowered and created a coalition of the most votes to prevent him from becoming the prime minister in Canadian history. And I think that needs to be reflected upon, which is why I find his comments about not changing his leadership style a bit strange, because that message was sent. And heading into this fall, he's been asked to change his style, etc. He has not he's not changed his critics, for example, either to put in a new front bench of people who just got elected or to reflect the realities of the Carney government. And he's telling people, and he said this to me too, him personally, that he'll do this after the review. And, when I think about a leader who's trying to present a different tone and approach, which is part of the mandate that Canadians gave him and said, look, we need you to reflect a little bit here. And he's not done that yet. And I can't, for me, he should be going into convention on a position of strength as opposed to playing defense, which is what we're doing now.
Jenny, Pierre Poilievre, he said he wouldn't reflect on his leadership style, but does he need to think about that? Does he need to change how he is speaking to the portion of Canadians who did not vote for him?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to speak for him. I think he has spent a lot of time thinking, when you lose an election, you can't help but spend a lot of time thinking about why.
He gave a one-word answer, though, when he was asked about that. He said no, he's not.
I think the question seemed like it was saying, are you to blame for Chris d'Entremont leaving the floor? Do you lend credence to his comments about your leadership style, which I think he doesn't. But I do think that he has been reflective of how to win the next election. And what I will say is it's complicated. I mean, I think sometimes questions about leadership style or approach imply that you can only have one. And for Poilievre, he has a real challenge and opportunity to show a few different styles to different voter segments. The style that we're talking about, this more assertive fighter approach, has a huge amount of appeal with thousands and thousands of new voters who showed up for Poilievre, oftentimes young people. And I do not think he should drop that. I think that's one of his greatest strengths. But he also needs to show some voters that he can be a calm, serious manager, that he can speak about macroeconomics and serious subjects that they want to hear from him on. I saw a lot of that last Friday at the speech he gave. We saw that from him in the debates, I think, in the last election, especially the English language debate. So that he has that in him as well. He's a complicated guy. And I think the question is when to show what side to what people, when to put what in the window, what issues to focus on. And my sense is that is his sole focus in the coming months.
Erika, I want to get to you in a moment, but Regan, go ahead.
Look, I think Mr. Poilievre, his job as opposition leader is to present a government in waiting. And when you don't win an election, the people of Canada have sent a message. The fact is, the challenge for the opposition is to, hold the government to account, and in doing so, continuing to foster the desire for change. The Prime Minister's come in, and Mr. Carney is one of the most accomplished people we've ever had sitting in the chair of Prime Minister. And he's come in and one by one, step by step, has been dismantling the Trudeau legacy. And why? Because Canadians wanted a change in policy, but when they had a choice of leader, they looked at Mr. Poilievre and Mr. Carney and said, look, we think Mr. Carney's a better fit for us. So on the basis of that alone, Mr. Poilievre has to think and reflect on, how do I do things a bit differently? He has different elements of leadership in his locker, but he seems to have one play, and that play doesn't work.
Erika, where does that leave Pierre Poilievre? Does he need to think about his leadership style?
Yeah, I think he has several in his back pocket. I think right now he's continuing to lead with the style that was maybe more suited for Justin Trudeau.
And is that about the leadership review that's coming up, that he needs to strengthen that base so that he can be successful in that leadership review and then perhaps change the channel?
I'm not worried about the leadership review, to be honest. I mean, all the delegates are mostly selected. I think there's a big support for Pierre within the Conservative base still. I think when I'm talking about maybe a shift of leadership style, it is that government in waiting tone, where he's leading more with facts and figures and really presenting an alternative for Canadians, as opposed to maybe some of the tactics we saw against Justin Trudeau. So I honestly look at January as just a moment in time that's part of our Constitution to review our leader. I don't think he's in trouble with a Conservative base. I think it's where he should be focusing going forward in the potential upcoming election, whenever that may be, is on being that alternative for other Canadians that maybe didn't vote for him last go around. Just
a couple of minutes left. Ginny, if you were advising Pierre Poilievre now, you helped him win the leadership. What's one word of advice that you would give him?
Stay confident. Don't get distracted. Don't worry too much about what people in Ottawa think. There's a much bigger country. That's what I would tell him. Look, I think that sometimes you confuse the base with this new movement, this broad coalition of voters that supported Poilievre in the last election. These people are not, these very young people who want to see that side of him. They're not like asset-owning baby boomers in Toronto and Montreal who opine on politics in our mainstream media channels. That's just, and so I think it's harder for people to understand. But he gets them. He gets them. He connects with them. He needs to win a bigger coalition than that. But I think he needs to stay confident and stick to what's been successful for him in the past.
Regan, just briefly, you told the National Post that Pierre Poilievre, in your words, is a fork in a world full of soup. Is he the right man to lead the Conservative Party?
Well, if he can become a spoon, the answer would be yes. I'll go one step further, and we've been talking a lot about caucus. Brian Mulroney and Stephen Harper and Jim Flaherty knew how to engage with a caucus and bring people along and bring the country along. And there's some lessons there in how Mr. Poilievre can adjust his leadership style with his team in order to bring them along and then bring the country along. And if you have your own team out there reflecting on their positions within the Conservative Party, that's not a good moment. And so for him to become a spoon involves really style, tone, how he works with his team, how he leads. And there are some policy tweaks as well. But by and large, Canadians seem to like the Conservative policy platform that was on offer because the Liberals, one by one, are taking those elements and incorporating them into a government agenda. So it has to be about leadership from the top, and I think he can get there.
Glad to have you all here this morning. We will talk again closer to January around that leadership review. In the meantime, thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks.
Ginny Roth is a Conservative strategist, served as Director of Communications on Pierre Poilievre's leadership campaign. Erika Barootes is a Conservative commentator, former Principal Secretary to the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith. And Regan Watts is a former senior aide to the late Conservative Finance Minister, Jim Flaherty. You've been listening to The Current Podcast. My name is Matt Galloway. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon.